Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Dancing SOBR podcast. I'm going to make this intro really fast. A huge shout out to Movita Juice Bar, our sponsor. Go to movitajuicebar.com so you can order some of their deliciousness. They only use good stuff to make their stuff. Shout out to Outer Circle Media, here where we record this podcast. If you're interested in doing a podcast, please hit them up at outercirclemedia.com. Today's guest is a very good friend of mine, a photographer, and let's just say welcome to Noe Montes. Hey everybody, welcome back once again to the Dancing SOBR podcast, and today we have a special friend, a friend who's been around for a really long time, and actually one of the first photographers that was very, very generous with information when I needed it, and a good friend and a good photographer, Mr. Noé Montes.
Hi. Thank you for having me, Rafa. I appreciate it. It's good to see you. It's been a minute.
It's been a while. Yeah. You've been busy. You've been all over the, Southern California.
The region, yeah.
The region. We'll get into that in a minute. But just to get started, I usually like to ask people, like where you were born and where you grew up and a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I was born in Modesto, California, in the Central Valley.
Norteño.
Yeah, that's right, Norteño. So I was born in Modesto, but when I was growing up, my parents were farm workers, migrant farm workers, which means we followed the harvest around. Yeah. So we moved around every 6 months. Every 6 months we moved to a different place, following the harvest. Often it was the same place. We'd go back to the same place every year.
What fruit did you follow, or different fruits?
Different fruits. So we picked in May, right now actually, the cherry, the cereza. That's what's happening right now. And it's funny, every year I remember that because I see cherries in the market. I'm like, oh, it's May. But anyway, no, it's true.
I just saw a box of cherries at the market because the local markets, señora, she just has "Mira, hay fresas." Big old box.
Yeah, because it's May. So anyway, we would start with cherries in May, and then chabacán, durazno, cucumber, tomato.
¿Qué es chabacán?
Chabacán is apricots.
Okay.
And peaches.
That's all of California.
Yeah, and then as the kind of summer went on, it was like a pear, and then we'd end with grape. In October, we'd pick grape in the north.
Yeah.
So and then we'd move sometimes to Yuma, Arizona, where my parents worked in the citrus. So that's why I grew up moving around all the time.
I actually did a little bit of farm working when I was little. When I was 12 and 13, for 2 summers, I went with my uncle and with my dad, and we did onions. And onions are smelly, dude.
Yeah.
You would come home and you'd still smell for a few weeks.
How did you like the work?
Oh, it was horrible. It was, I was a kid, and you're just like, you're in the middle of these rows and rows, and you don't see the end of the field, but you have to get to the end.
Right.
You just have to cut.
You can't just walk to the end. You have to do something to get all the way there.
And I remember one time I actually kept overhydrating to the point where I threw up because I thought I needed more water. And I just kept drinking water until the point where I threw up. And that's going to be the opening for my memoir.
I was going to say, that's a good story.
I have a really vivid memory of that. But I do remember the family is always talking about, like, oh, vamos a las fresas, and, all the things that everybody would follow. And I never did any of that. Just, a couple of fields here and there, and we'd come back. And it was only here in Lancaster. We didn't go far north to work on that. But yeah. I had a little bit of that experience. So
that's cool. I'm glad you did, actually. It's an interesting experience, right?
Yeah. It's definitely interesting and scary at night, Because we didn't have, when we would go, we didn't have, like, a place to stay. So we would sleep in the car or, like, camp out, just things like that. So it was scary to me, being a little kid, being out in the middle of the desert, freezing.
Right.
And
sleeping in the car.
Yeah, sleeping in the car. And I remember our oldest uncle, he was, really old. He was like the strongest one, and he'd sleep outside with just a thin sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, yo no puedo dormir en ese carro. He'd just go outside and cover himself in a thin sheet. He looked like a burrito. And
He was the toughest one.
and he was good. Yeah, he was the toughest one. And he was the oldest one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tío Pascual.
Well, that's cool. It's good to have someone like that around, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And he would actually eat raw onions and take bites out of them.
Yeah. Yeah,
When
I've
he
seen
got
that too.
hungry.
I can't do that. But, yeah.
But I'm sorry. So after your youth growing up and Modesto and touring
Yeah.
touring the field circuit,
Mm-hmm.
was there a point that you by yourself moved to LA, or did your family come to LA, or
No.
did you finish high school in
I
Modesto?
finished high school. Well, so here's the thing. I never actually lived in Modesto. I was just born there. And it was just like my parents were passing through there on their way somewhere, you know? So we moved around a lot. And then when I was in high school, my parents bought a house in Yuma, Arizona.
Oh.
So they kind of kept moving. But I stopped moving so much because like in my senior year of high school, I didn't move so I could stay and finish, high school.
Yeah.
And then I went to 2 years of community college there. I got an associate's degree in electronics, ahí en Yuma. And then from there, I moved to Phoenix because it was like the big city from where I lived, I was there for a couple years. Met my now wife there, Christine. She's from the East Coast. She's from Jersey, and she had lived in New York. And I
Jersey.
kind of, at that time, I had started to become interested in art. And when I was going to college, I took a couple of photo classes. So that's how I started in photo. I really liked it. But anyway, from there, from Phoenix, Christina and I moved to New York. We went to New York City. We were there for a couple of years, and then came to LA. And that was like 20 years ago. So I've been here like 20 years now, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a trip. What do you laugh?
I don't know. It just seemed like 20 years, bro. It seemed like a
seems
sentence,
like a lot,
bro.
I don't know. It's interesting.
So you came here when you were in your mid-20s already, huh?
Yeah, mid-20s.
Wait, you're younger than me. I keep forgetting that.
Mid-20s, early, yeah, I think like late 20s,
Yeah.
mid-20s. I'll go see.
What triggered the interest in photography? I mean, if you were doing like computer
I was doing
electronics.
electronic
So
repair
electronics like TVs and radios and
like
stuff. Circuit boards.
yeah, circuit boards specifically for laser equipment that they use in agriculture and construction. So that's what I was doing. I did that for a couple of years, but I was kind of bored with it, bro. The like right away, like
I actually did.
after-
I did electronics and electrical too, and
Yeah.
kind of same thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I got bored. I was bored with it, and I was like, "Oh my god, am I gonna do this for the rest of my life?"
Yeah. It's like something that I like to do for fun,
Uh-huh.
or like to fix something, but I didn't want to do it every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw other people that were doing the same thing that I was doing, like older guys, and I was like, "That's my future," And they were nice people, but I was like, I don't think that's what I want for myself. But I didn't know what else to do. But so I had an interest in art. I started taking some photo classes, like a painting class, different art classes, art history. I started learning about that while I was working. After work, I'd take these college classes, and I took a bunch of different classes. But when I took the photo class, and this was back in the day of like dark room, black and white, enlarger, chemicals, all that stuff, I was like, oh my god, I love this.
Yeah,
like right away, I was like, oh shit, I love this. Like
It's part of the math in it, no? Or like the problem solving.
the math, the fact that there's like this process, right, that you have to follow, and then the magic. Like
Yeah.
there's math and there's magic, right, in it. So I remember I used to stay in the dark room, and we had like free access to the dark room and stuff. So I'd just be working in the dark room, like looking at pictures, doing all that work, and then I'd come outside and it was dark and it was like 3 a.m, and I was like, oh, I've been here like 8 hours,
Yeah.
and
People have that story about Vegas, but you
Yeah.
have it about the dark room.
yeah, it's true. The next day I was all crudo too. So. No, but I think that kind of showed me that was something that was like I could spend that much time with without even thinking about it. I was really into it. So then I just kind of grew from there.
When you were there and in the school and all that, were you with family or were you already like living on your own or with your wife?
No, I was with I was still living at home with my parents. I was like 22. No, I was like
Oh, you were
21,
little.
22.
Yeah. Really young.
And I was living at home. My parents were still moving around a little bit, so sometimes I'd be living at home alone or with my brother, who's a year younger than I am. Yeah. So it was a little bit of both.
Just wondering, because sometimes at different ages you're looking for different things in life, you know.
Yeah.
Like, so maybe like
Yeah.
that's.
But you know what?
I mean, it didn't happen. Different things. I was at that age. I was looking at theater in different ways, and you know, but like you're discovering photography. So,
you know, that reminds me though, because this is important about photography, at least for me. One of the things that happened when I started taking pictures, that I didn't realize until like much later. Like I kind of looked at it more objectively, and I was like, oh, that's what was happening. But I was able to look at my life and my family and our home life and my environment like more objectively through photography. And I started to understand some of the stuff that was happening, like some of the traumatic stuff that was going on. It allowed me to remove myself a little bit from it, look at it objectively, and understand it instead of being like all in it emotionally all the time, like all getting damaged by it.
yeah, because sometimes you can't see it when you're in it.
Yeah, no, I mean, how could you, right? It's like all.
I have to bring up this thing that happened to me when because I had done performing arts. You know, I had been in a band.
Yeah.
And I had been in theater, and I had always performed, and I had never seen myself. You know, I had always done all these things and never seen I'd never experienced what the audience saw. When I had my first photo show, I remember I hung it up, and right before the doors opened, I was like, "Oh shit!" Like I'm now like an observer too. Like I can now look at myself, and that became my performance. So it's like kind of like me looking at my performance. So it's similar to like probably what happened to you.
Yeah.
And that was my first show where I was like, "Oh,
it's like you get a different perspective on something that's so deeply personal, right?
Yeah,
It's really interesting. It's really cool, and that's something that that's been true for me about photography and about art making since, you know, and I've really appreciated and gone after that like more intentionally now that once you know.
Yeah, I think you're one of the most sensitive people I know. Not only when you're engaged in conversation and you listen and you carefully answer people and you just always really thoughtful. And so maybe that's part of like what was brewing in those moments in those years, or I don't know if you carried, you know, your youth or what you were talking about, like trauma or that made you that way and you express it that way. I don't really know exactly what I'm asking here, but
like are you asking where that comes from? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Well,
because your images, I mean, you do a lot of photography of still connected to the people that are farm workers, the people in desert communities, the people in farming communities, a lot of inland communities, and there's respect and just appreciation of the people that you photograph, and it's always, you know, sincere and simple and
thank you,
just really thoughtful.
Thank you for that. Well, where it comes from, I don't know, like I suspect that it's partly your parents, right? Like my mom is a really interesting person who has lived through a lot and is really sensitive, and I can see that I have inherited some of her sensibilities. She's a romantic, like I'm a romantic, you know what I mean? Like you're a romantic too, like, you know.
Definitely,
like we you know, we want things to work. We want people to be happy. We, you know, all of that stuff.
Hopeful romantic.
Hopeful, we're hopeful. And so there's that. And then, I mean, there's also like that cholo thing of like you don't show your hand, you don't show your face, like, you know, you just keep it all like here no matter what. You know, you're just kind of like But when you're doing that, I mean, you're thinking, right? You're just not expressive like that, you know. So maybe partly that, uh, and then I don't know. I don't know what else. Like,
That cholo thing is interesting.
Yeah.
Now because like, as I think of the images of the people that you photographed, they have that stance, you know, even though they're not like the photographs are not of cholos, you know,
Right.
specifically, but it's farm workers and they all have that respect, you know,
Yeah.
like and that's one thing that a lot of cholos do have is that respect.
Right.
You know, I'll respect you, you respect
That's
me. And
right. That
like,
sense of like
and you don't have
decorum. It's
yeah,
weird,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
almost aristocratic.
That's the old school
Yeah.
like cholos, yeah.
That's right. The old school cholos.
I mean, I don't know now, but
Yeah.
they probably still have that. But yeah, there's definitely that in your photography. Like, I could now see the picture of like the image that I have of one of your photographs. I could just imagine. You know how they used to hang the shirt?
Yeah,
over?
I do.
I could imagine that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So
Right.
yeah, and you know, when I photograph people, often I think that one of the things that's working towards this thing that you're describing is that I feel like, if I can say this, and maybe it's not my place, but I feel like people recognize me. You know, like they're like most of the time we have had at least one or several conversations before we get to the photography, and in that time that we have spent together, they see me and they're like, you're like you're from here.
Yeah.
You know, you're my nephew, you're my brother. I know you.
Yeah,
you know?
we understand each other.
Yeah, we understand each other, and there's that trust. And then when there's that trust, then there can be space to, you know, to let people present themselves, show you who they want to, you know, who they are, or sometimes it's like you capture something that people. Well, most of the time, you know, we're all kind of performing, right?
Yeah.
So
Always.
you know, you capture that thing that they want to present to you, and through you to everybody else. But sometimes you also capture something that they're able to let their guard down, and it's just like so real. And that's actually really cool. That when that happens, that's really great.
That's one of the things that I learned in theater too, is like that we're all always performing. When you walk to the market, like, you know, your role is shopper.
Yeah.
And you behave in a certain way, and you have certain lines that you say at certain points, and you know, and what I used to do is when taking pictures, and I wanted them to drop that, is just like be like, oh, we're done. Oh, okay, we're done. Oh, wait, let me get one more. After they drop that just reminded me of.
There's different ways. For me, it's time. Like you shoot and shoot and shoot, and you spend like a half hour and then an hour if you have time, right? Sometimes if you don't have that time, but then after a minute, you can't keep that up. You can't keep that roll up, you know, or that facade or whatever it is, and you kind of let go a little, and then you kind of start getting somewhere else. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But that thing about the roles that you were saying, our performance, I was just thinking about that recently, and I was wondering if it's all performance, right? If we're all performing for each other, like what is there like a real us?
Well, yeah, I mean, there has to be, but you know, like I think it's the Buddhist belief that like every moment has 3,000 factors. So in this moment here, you know, there's 3,000 factors why we're both here. And so those 3,000 factors decide how we act with each other. Now, I don't know the factors, but you know, it could be like why we're each here, what we both do in life, what kind of families we have. And so all those 3,000 factors decide how you and I are going to interact with each other in this moment.
In this moment.
Yeah. And so the real you is just, you know, underneath all those 3,000 factors, I guess. I don't know. I mean,
have you seen that you?
Well, through meditation, I could say a few times I have. Yeah. I could say that I have personally like found ways to like, you know, remove and remove and remove, but you can't do it. It's not a sustained thing. Or you could hold it for a while. You could get to a place and you carry it, and you know, some people call it, you know, being in the zone, or some people, you know, use it in different ways.
But you can't be in the world that way all the time.
I don't think it's possible, because there's a lot of things that come at you, and so
Yeah.
things bounce up. I mean, you know, that's just my experience.
Right.
It probably is possible, but
Right.
yeah. What do you think?
I don't know. Recently, I've been a little bit confused about that, to be honest. Yeah.
About the real you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been some personal challenges and some other things that I thought like I had some stuff figured out.
Yeah.
And recently, I'm like, I have to re-engage in a different way,
Yeah.
So it's been interesting. But yeah, it's led me to think about that. So like,
Do you meditate?
I do.
Yeah.
Every
So,
day.
sometimes people like don't like get to that core self unless there's like a traumatic experience or something, that
Yeah.
pushes everything out of the way and you're just there. But through meditation, I think it's possible. Or because we have a lot of layers of daily life that are not us. Just like having to get gas.
That are roles.
Yeah. Or things that you need just to keep going, like having to, go to the market, for example. Just all these little tiny things, and having to deal with like, you might be in a great place in your mind, and then all of a sudden, you hear the news, and it's just some fucking stupid bullshit that just like puts you in another place and builds another wall. So it's hard to remove all those things all of the time, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Around people like you, I think it's easier to like, really like center and be yourself,
Yeah.
But in certain situations, you do have to just be performative,
We're called upon all the time to
Yeah.
to play these roles.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
getting a little far away from.
no, that's
history.
great. I love that topic. Anytime you want to go there. I do want to talk a little bit about your projects out at Cuyama. Is that how you say it? Cuyama? Did I spell it wrong? Damn it. And the New Americans and farm workers and all your Imperial Valley stuff. I mean, you have this connection with all these inland farm communities.
Right. Right. Rural
and
communities.
not just about, if you could share with us, not just about the work itself, but how does one go about to get work like this? And how does one just, build this kind of portfolio? I think it's beautiful.
Well, in part, the reason that I've done work in these communities outside of LA, but kind of around LA, kind of a lot of them are within a couple hours of Los Angeles. It's partly because that's where the work has led me, right? Like that's where there was an opportunity to work, and so yeah, I've created this portfolio of like these communities that are close to LA but outside of LA. Some of them are rural, some of them aren't. I've done a lot of work in the Inland Empire recently, but so they've all been born out of different, again, partly because of the funding streams. So I'd say the first project that I did that kind of is in this particular model was the one about farm workers in the Coachella Valley. So I've always been applying to different funding sources, fellowships and grants and things like that. And there was one called the Alicia. It still exists. People can still apply to it. The Alicia Patterson Foundation puts out a fellowship, gives out fellowships every year. I applied to do this project, a documentary project about farm workers in the Eastern Coachella Valley. Initially, I was going to do it in the entire, or kind of like Central California where I grew up. That's what I wanted to do. But as I started thinking about it, I was like, this work is going to take me away from home like a lot. And I have little kids, and I can't be gone all the time. So what I did was I proposed that I do it in the Coachella Valley, which is a place that I was a little bit familiar with. So I got that fellowship. It was like $40,000 to do like a year project, and I carried that project out over like a year. But honestly, it turned into like 2 years, because once you finish the actual work, like the documentary work of interviewing and photographing people, then the other job is that you have to activate that in some way. So exhibit it, publish it, use it. I tend to use my work in workshops, like educational workshops, things like that.
How does that work?
So
Like, who are you educating and what about?
in that case, I found a local youth media organization called Coachella Unincorporated that was working
Like young journalists?
young journalists,
Oh,
yeah,
that's badass.
in the Eastern Coachella Valley, still around, still a good organization. So they were teaching young people how to tell their own stories, right? How to own their narratives, you know, and I connected with them, and I said, hey, I'm doing this documentary work in this area. I want to connect with young people, and I want to, you know, share all the things that I'm learning with them, and I also want to pass on my skills to them, you know. So
Wow.
so we set up a number of workshops where, you know, I would come in and teach them literally like skill stuff, like this is the camera, this is the f-stop, you know, all of these things. This is and then also like art stuff, like think about color, think about which colors work together, all of these things, the things that I use in my own work. So that's one way, right? You connect with like some local organization or somebody who's on the ground in that place that you're working with, doing similar work, and you kind of you offer your help.
Do you write your own grants or do you have help? Or?
I do write my own grants, and I'm not great at it.
Yeah. Obviously, you're pretty good.
Well, I guess I get some, right?
Quite a few, yeah.
But I always feel like it's, you know, like I could be doing a better job. And then I talk to people like, you know, Eric Ibarra, who founded Las Fotos. And I've talked to him, and he's like, oh yeah, I just hired this grant writer on Upwork or whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I'm like, huh. Like,
wow. That's a good idea.
You know, there are people who think like that, you know, they have a facility of just kind of like going, okay, this part gets handled like this, but I do everything myself. Like from writing the grant to taking the pictures to doing the post-production work and then putting together exhibits and all of that stuff. Like it's not about control. It's just about, I don't even know what it's about. That's just the way I developed my work.
I'm the same way. I do have help with writing, but when it comes to like the other parts, like editing, exhibiting, and all that, like I do feel like I want to handle everything.
Right.
And it's weird to let go sometimes, which I have had to do because the bigger show that I got to do, there's no way I could have done it all by myself. So when I did let go, I was pretty amazed at the work that
the one at La Plaza. Yeah. And you liked how it turned out.
Fuck yeah. I mean, when it was the first time that I showed up, everything was already printed and framed.
Yeah.
And they were gonna hang, and I walked in and I saw the crew, and I was like, okay,
what am I supposed to do?
I'll be at my house if you guys need me. I'm like 2 blocks away. And I came back and it was all up, and I was like, holy
great.
fuck.
Yeah, that's nice. I've had that happen too, and that's great.
Yeah, but otherwise, I mean, you know, I'm a one-man show, one-man party.
Right.
Fucking, you know.
And I just want to take that, you know, a minute to mention, like, I really admire what you're doing, your overall project.
Thank you.
You know, like it's your life, right?
Yeah.
But how you're just, you know, just trying different things.
Yeah.
And you know, I know it all is a lot of work. You know, it's so time consuming, but you're keeping at it and you're building something, and it's really interesting to watch. Like I admire you.
It's just like yourself, where it's just like you just want to keep working, you just want to keep doing, and you just want to keep growing. And this project itself, the podcast, is because I want to learn from people like you more, and these conversations that we don't always get to have, because when we do see each other, it's like a job or something really quick, and you know, we don't have a lot of time, and even when we do have time, we're not always engaging in this kind of conversation. You know, there's a lot of.
It's very intentional today.
Yeah. So when these conversations here with the people that I've been fortunate enough to bring in have been beautiful.
That's good.
So yeah, I mean, for that, I think
that's great.
You and everybody else. That's great.
Sorry, I think I got off the topic.
No, that's okay. I mean, this is what we're here for. So I want to get into just like a little bit of like photography things for like the photographer. You're the first photographer I have on as a guest, by the way. So this is cool. And you were also like the person who has helped me a lot in the beginning when I wasn't exactly sure of what I was doing, and you were very generous with your help. And I remember when I was photographing for Self-Help Graphics, series of portraits, and it was one of the first like grants that my name was on. It was a Self-Help Graphics grant, but my name was on it as like the artist that's gonna, do the work.
Yeah.
And I was to shoot some portraits of people in the neighborhood, and it was the first time that I was kind of gonna be working with like studio lights. And I remember I called you and I said, "What do I do?" You probably don't remember this, but you told me like specific settings and specific settings for the ISO and for the stop and everything.
And stuff.
Yeah. So
did it work?
Yeah, it worked. It worked beautifully. It worked beautifully.
That's great.
So I thank you for that.
Happy to hear that.
So it's just a few questions that are just general,
Sure.
General fun questions. But so like, what is the one thing that you wished you knew when you started photography?
That I wished I knew.
That you know now.
That I know
you wish
now.
you knew then.
Let me think. That's so my journey in photography has been like very, very like, just growing little by little with each thing that you do. So I don't know. That's hard to say because that would mean that something would have had to change, right? In my journey here.
Yeah, maybe.
And I don't know, like I'm here.
Or how about something technical that you wish?
I maybe would have liked to learn or know more about lighting initially. Now I know quite a bit. It's taken a lot of like work.
Yeah.
But yeah, just lighting is such a fascinating thing.
I think the first time that I met you was when you were photographing together with Juan Luis Garcia, the Voto Latino.
Right? Is that where we met, you think?
I think so.
I was wondering about that today.
I think that was the first time that we met. Juan brought me on and you were there and you had the gold background.
I photographed
and
Sadio Dawson.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great people, but I remember that was the first time that I was like, wow, this guy is meticulous.
Oh, yeah.
Not only that, but like the way that I work is just like, oh, okay, we're here, we got to do this, we got to do that. And Juan, too, we were both like just fast movers, but you were like, okay, let's put that light over here. You're very deliberate, or like very precise, and it was. I learned a lot just the times that I have worked with you and watching your lighting and watching what you do with that.
That's funny because for me, when I'm in that process, I always feel like I'm rushing.
Really?
Yeah. No. I always feel like I'm moving too fast.
No.
Like I need more time and more space to. Maybe it's just I want more time and more space. To see more carefully.
I think I work too fast. I should work slower because most of the times too, when I have clients, they're like, "Oh, this was a lot faster than I thought," and I'm like, "Damn, I should maybe take some more time." Because that's another thing that I always tell people too is take as many pictures as you can because you want to have options to pull from. But yeah, I think your style and it shows too in your work. Like everything is very still, right? Yeah. Like whether you're photographing a shopping cart or you're photographing a person,
it's very
there's a lot of
very considered, right? Yeah. Like it's like you said before, I think about things a lot. So like I'm for one thing is I'm working the frame. Like I'm got the camera and I'm like moving it around, up and down, like walking over there going, what does it look like from over here,
Yeah.
And that's nice. It's nice to have that amount of time to look again to look and see, and then just kind of, you know, the photographer Stephen Shore. No, he said something about photography that stuck with me, which is that taking a picture is like resolving like a math problem or something, right? And you're working it and you're working it until you find the solution. And in photography, that means like kind of moving that frame around until it all works, like until everything works. And it doesn't mean like it has to be symmetrical or it has to like present a very specific thing. It's almost like yeah, exactly. Like in intuition, well, you're like,
everybody has their own it'll work.
Yeah,
like
right. That's
their
true
own
too.
moment. Yeah, of like, oh, this works.
How it works for them. Yeah.
That's interesting because the way that I do that is because of my theater background too, where we always like put people in certain spaces and you block so that everybody can be seen.
Yeah.
So I imagine it like, you know, this cup and this bottle are like different characters in the scene, and I have to like move the camera around until I get,
yeah. That's
until I
stage.
get the same, the stage,
Yeah,
so
the frame
I
is
picture
the
the frame as a stage,
right? Yeah. So then you move around, and then you know you get somewhere. You feel like you're getting closer, right? And then you get somewhere, and you're like, oh, here it is, click,
click,
you know?
click, click, click,
yeah. Oh, and then but then like I like that you said click, 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 because after that, once you get there, then space opens up in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, like you get there, and then it kind of goes.
Yeah.
And then it's like about chance, about like gesture, about all these little other things, you know?
What the subject is.
Yeah, what the subject is doing. You know, sometimes yesterday I was photographing my friend, you know, who's moving, so we set up a portrait session, and I kept going, like looking, and he would do something, just kind of like, you know, move in his chair or something, and I'd be like, oh, that was it, you know, like do that again, you know?
It's hard to get people to do it again.
Yeah, it is
naturally.
Because you can't get there. But you're in a space where there's an awareness, and even though it might not be the same thing, something similar, you know, is there, and you can capture that.
Something that gets you to that place. Where you say that works.
Yeah, something that
Do you have a somebody that you would say that influences your work the most? I know there's a lot of influences that we pull from, but
I would say literature. You know, you and I have talked about books before.
And I finally started reading Bolaño.
Oh, did you?
Oh my fucking
Which
God! I started reading it in Spanish. Salvaje.
Los Detectives Salvajes. Yeah.
I started reading it in Spanish, and pretty much every sentence is perfection. Like I can't explain it. How I just opened it, and then like every word is carrying me to the next word. Yeah. Like every word is connected to that last one, and there's like nothing is wasted. Yeah. It's like a perfect.
He's a really great writer. This is super nerdy, but there's this lecture on SoundCloud, which is him, Bolaño, doing like a lecture about Argentinian writers, and like I said, it's super nerdy because he talks about like very specific people. But it's hilarious. I listen to it over and over, and I just laugh my ass off.
Well, he's comedic.
He's really funny.
In that whole opening of that, you know, he's talking shit about professors, and it's funny. Yeah,
it's great. And no, Bolaño's great. So to answer your question, literature is a place where I take a lot of inspiration, and I feel like it gives me a lot of ideas for my own creative work. Cesar Aira is another photographer or writer who I think is really interesting, and he like describes his own work as like he tries to create with his writing like the scene is like the most like mundane, like just everyday thing that is happening, you know. He tries to create that scene, you know, and then he injects like something surreal into that, and the juxtaposition of that is you know really interesting. So I think about that in photography, like how do you you know, how do you depict something that's like so normal, so like every day, and then bring something into that just opens up that image into like, you know,
or even the mundaneness itself.
Yeah,
is so
that's another
attractive.
That's another thing. Like, this is true.
because
the thing itself, you could go through it, right, into the other side of it.
Yeah.
But it has to be like really mundane. It has to be like
stripped of like
it has to be
everything,
stripped of style. It has to be stripped of artifice. It has to be stripped of, you know, like maybe like we were talking about earlier. It has to be like the real self of the thing, right?
Wow. Yeah. Without any layers of like
without
bullshit.
anything at all, and then it like, boom, like it takes you to the other side of whatever what we're always trying to reach. You know.
You hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but writers and photography, there's this one photographer who I think has probably influenced me quite a bit. His name is Roe Etheridge. He's a contemporary photographer. He is in like New York and does a lot of commercial photography. Does a lot of like high fashion stuff, but also a lot of fine artwork. And he mixes like his fine artwork with his commercial work in a way that's really interesting. Like he takes outtakes from commercial work and presents those as fine artwork. And so he like conceptually the way he works with images, like, and the way he addresses how images work in the world is interesting to me. But also within the frame, what he does is interesting too. Like he creates like this sense of uncanniness, like something that's recognizable but off, you know. So that's interesting to me. But many influences. The Americans by in the American West. I'm sorry. In the American West.
By Avedon?
By Avedon is a really big influence on me.
Fucking beautiful.
I mean, getting back to like you know what, like
the simplicity.
The simplicity.
Yeah.
But in his case, there's a lot of style there, but it's all like, you know, nothing was produced. It's
kind of like he found it.
He found it.
Or he moved the camera to get it, or he talked to the people. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, right. Because I mean, it was just average people, but he moved the camera, or he directed in a way where
he saw that. I mean, he probably did a lot, right? First, he recognized it.
Yeah.
And then he pictured it in his mind, you know, and then he executed it, right? And then he printed it. Like his printing was meticulous. And Insane. Have you ever seen any of his notes and stuff?
No.
Like, you know, he had like a big
4x6,
you know, huge print, and it's just like, you know, notes and writing and circles and, you know, like, you know, burn and dodge and all this, you know, all this stuff here. So he was, you know, it was all very considered. But anyway, the project itself, the fact that he went out into the American West and found all these people and saw their beauty, that's something I really admire, because, you know, we're all beautiful, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, he found, or he managed to capture just like perfect imperfections, I guess, or something like that, you know, where it's like, wow, I didn't expect to feel that way when I opened that book, but it's fucking beautiful.
And then the way that body of work influenced culture. Yeah. I mean, those Gap ads from the 90s and all of that, you know, that's straight from that particular project.
That's true.
And all of those things have since evolved in different iterations, you know, and continue to be presented in that way. So that project is really interesting to me.
So talking about how he had all these notes in the printing process, and you being somebody that started with film and then moved to digital, I started sincerely doing photography or like seriously doing it when it was all digital. So I didn't really get darkroom. I used to shoot with film, but I would print it. I would have it developed. I never learned darkroom myself. And being that person yourself that started, you know, and learned all the chemicals and then moved into digital, like, how do you feel about the argument about, you know, editing in analog and editing in digital? Or any thoughts?
The digital versus analog in photography argument, I think it's dumb.
Not. Yeah, I mean, I don't want you to approach it as an argument, but like, you know, what are your thoughts on, you know?
Well, I mean, I think the argument is dumb because digital is so far superior to analog. It's so much more, and maybe because this is like how I work, but it gives you
Yeah.
so much more control.
Yeah.
You know,
So at the end, what's important is the final image.
right? You know, I will say that there is something about analog photography that digital photography can't quite accomplish, can't quite get there, and it's like almost like this ineffable thing. Like it's just like a
The je ne sais quoi.
it's like it's like
The
it's
magic.
like, but I've tried to say quoi, like I've tried to figure it out, and
I've tried to say quoi.
and it has to do with how space is rendered in the image. It's more
Like depth.
depth, like it's slightly more sculptural in analog. It's not as flat, and you can do stuff in digital to work. To try to resolve.
It's never
that,
the same, yeah.
But it's
I mean,
not
there
the
is a
same.
difference.
There is a difference,
Yeah.
but and then there's also and now I'm arguing for analog, but there's also the fact that you can't shoot a million images, right?
Yeah.
So you have to kind
Yeah.
of think about,
And that's why I was able to work,
Yeah.
because I was able to
yeah,
shoot fucking thousands of images a day.
right.
And that's why I was
Right.
able to.
Memory is cheap.
Yeah, exactly. And reusable.
Yeah. But in terms of working and like doing post production in digital, I love it. One of the things that I learned was, like, I was working on this job with a guy who was shooting video on the same job, and he had one of those red Dragon cameras, and they were kind of newish at the time. And I was, how do you like that thing? He's like, oh my god, I fucking love it. I'm like, why? He goes, this thing's got like 40 stops. He goes, it's just
shit.
like, it's just when you get a raw file, it's just like just a bunch of ones and zeros. It's just you can stretch it, you can pull it, and that made me start thinking about digital files differently. It made me kind of see a digital file, a raw digital file, from a DSLR, almost like as like clay.
Yeah.
It's just a starting point,
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And it's just like a bunch of ones and zeros that you can like push and pull and stretch and double up and flip and all that stuff, and do whatever you want with it. Now, I never actually push it that far. Like I never create effects or crunch the shadows or stuff like that. Like I'm always trying to work within certain parameters that I've developed in my brain about it. But the fact that you have that much control over digital is really interesting to me.
Yeah. When I first started hearing the argument, I first fell in love with the computer with writing, because I used to, write with pens, and I never thought the computer would give me the same feel. But eventually, I remember just like, falling in love the same way with the computer, and I mean, I'm all about like flow and like energy flow, and so let it flow through me into the computer, and then so when I got to editing on in Lightroom, I felt the same way. Like it's not chemicals, but you are sending signals. You're not mixing things manually, but what you do does change a raw file and does pull and stretch.
And that's something that's difficult to articulate, but it's true. A digital file has like it's not infinitely malleable. Like as much as we kind of think that it is, it's not. Like it wears out, which is weird, right? Like it can get washed out if you compress it too much, or things like that. So there's like some physical traits, physical characteristics, or characteristics from the physical and real world that apply to a digital file in the digital world, which is kind of weird. But yeah, so there's a connection there, and it's funny to think about, like like you're saying, like you have flow and soul, and like how you describe yourself and maybe your work, and how that gets translated into digital. That's weird.
So that's my
It's
next
cold,
question.
right?
Somebody asked me once, a painter asked me, do you think photographs have spirit? And I answered in the same way. I said, well, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm working, and it's working through me, and I'm the one that, because you can keep working on a photo forever, but there, you get to a point where you're like, boom, it just hits, and it hits you. And so if you're the person editing, like, you have given something to that
Right.
thing, right? And it does carry
Right.
some kind of spirit. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like images have everything that their creator imbues in them,
Mhm.
right? Like all your intentions, like
Yeah, yeah.
all your history,
Yeah.
all of, you know,
All of your fucking sadness.
yeah, all of
Like,
your
it carries that
baggage, all
shit.
of your pain,
Yeah.
all of your happiness, all of your joy,
Yeah.
all of that. You're bringing it to the thing that you're doing, and especially like if you're working on a specific project about a specific theme,
Yeah.
or subject or place or whatever. Uh, all that you've learned and all that you are thinking about that place and all your feelings about it
Mhm.
are, you're putting it into that work.
Yeah.
That's like what? That's magic or something. I don't know how to describe that, but it's true. It's
Yeah.
true.
It's just like making a cup of coffee.
And the
It's
viewer can
everything.
recognize it.
Yeah.
Like if I go out here on the street and snap a picture, and then show that picture, it's like, well, there wasn't a lot behind that because I wasn't invested in it. You know what I mean? But if you have a picture that you took as a part of a project, you have a picture of taqueros, for instance, right? I think I've seen one of your pictures. I've seen many of your pictures, but I remember that one. And so what's that about, right? What's
Yeah.
that about for you? It's like about all your experience with that particular subject, your family, your history, the place where you live,
Yeah.
the fact that these people, this is how they make their living, and
Access to
you
that.
understand that,
Yeah.
access to that. All of that is imbued in that picture.
Yeah.
So yeah, that picture has a soul. That image has like
Yeah.
all of that in it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I stole those people's souls when I took
You
it.
did, yeah. Yeah, you should give it back.
Yeah, that's one of the photos that's touring with the LACMA show right now. By
That's
the way.
right.
Yeah, but I think
Congrats.
it's done already, so hopefully they'll bring it back. But just one more thing that I wanted to touch upon that I know is a personal I don't know what to call it, personal thing of yours. You like to always like be sensitive or talk about mental health issues and like be aware of those.
Yeah. Among other things, but yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah. Is that something that you like want to do more photography of, or how would you approach something like that in photography, or is that just something that you are an advocate for?
I want to make work about that for sure. It's very personal, in at least a few different ways. One of them is that I'm kind of learning about how trauma affects us, right? How trauma affects, how it shapes us. I'm learning about that through reading and through therapy and through just trying to be a better person. And as I learn, I'm like, holy shit! Like our community, Raza, we don't know anything about this, like, or very little. Some of us are starting to learn, but we don't even have the language, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this before. Like if somebody's having an episode or something, our reaction is often like, stay away, come on, get it together, and paquetas pendejo, like you got responsibilities and all that stuff. We have very little empathy, for that. So I'm learning about that. And then also I have family members, like close family members who, in fact, right now, one of my very close family members is in jail, like in county jail, because of they've had an episode, a schizophrenic episode, but it's become like a pattern, bro. Like every couple of years this happens, and it's strange because the first time it happened, like myself and my family were kind of out of our mind, like what's happening, like why, oh my God, like it's such an emergency. And then after it happens a couple of times, you get used to it. It's weird, right? And then we're at the point where they're actually better off right now where they are than being outside because of what's happening with their mental health. So, and that speaks to like the justice system and other problems we have. But but the fact that in our communities, in our families, this is like a normal thing, and this is almost like something that we come to accept as like a way to cope with mental health. Incarceration is just,
it's kind of like a sweep under the rug kind of thing, so things could continue to move forward in ways like,
and just the fact that there are not
in
better
society.
that there are not better systems and mechanisms to deal with those things that are happening. That's our that's the thing that we have come to rely on. That's just so bad. Pero in terms of making work about it, it's hard. It's actually hard. Like because I like to make work, and I want to make work that is nuanced, that is intelligent, that doesn't kind of hit you over the head with its message. So how do you make work about mental health that does that? It's kind of challenging. I mean, obviously you can just document people who are and their stories. That's one thing that I could do, and that generally is the mode that I work in. But I am trying to move away from work that's so didactic, that wears its kind of like its message on its sleeves, and is more creative. So I'm not sure how to do that. It's that housing is another thing that I'm always constantly thinking about. How do I make work about housing and about mental health that's interesting, that's beautiful, that's interesting, and that's meaningful.
A lot of times, I guess we get stuck in like the what's next and how do I do next. That's like a place where I find myself right now with like photography, is like what's next and how do I accomplish next. And we have these ideas and we have these thoughts, but they don't land yet. So and they don't always have to land.
They don't always have to land, but I think it's important to do the work, right? Like if you're just stuck a little bit, sometimes it's just good to just go and do the thing. Like say, okay, this might not work, but I'm just gonna go do it. It informs the process, informs the work always. So
that's true.
But yeah, so I guess what it means for me is that I have to go and try to do something about it.
Well, that's a tough one. I can't imagine. I don't do a lot of like really personal stuff.
Why not? Tell me about that.
That's another. I don't know. I just haven't been able to, like really. Some people, completely like, can turn the camera on themselves and their family.
I mean, Star Montana.
Exactly.
Mind, right?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I mean, the way that she is able to do that is so beautiful and hard and just intense, and I just have never been able to do that. I do have an idea for something like that I would have to do in the future. Not exactly, but just to document my family.
This is interesting to me, though. Have you thought about why you're not able to make work like that? Because
I've never
I'm in a
thought
similar
of that.
place.
Yeah, no, I've never actually thought about why, but I guess I will. Go home and think about that tonight.
I mean, I've thought about this because I want to make work about my own and my family's experience in trauma. Because I think it'll help other people, right? That's a big thing for me. Like the things that I do, it's important that they're helpful. And I've thought about my inability to make deeply personal work like that. And it has to do, for me at least, some of it is embarrassment, being embarrassed about it. And then I think about, why am I embarrassed about it, And this might be like a generational thing, but it has to do a little bit with like the kind of double consciousness, the concept of double consciousness, where back to performing roles, right? Like in the world we're this, and at home we're this, and in the world we want to like fit in to how we're supposed to be, but at home things might be all fucked up. You can't bring that over here, and growing up in this country,
part of the old school, like cállate,
yeah. Oh, that, yeah.
Yeah, whatever happens in la casa.
Right, there's that. And it's related. It ties into it. But I've been thinking about how growing up in this country now is changing. But, like, when we were younger, you kind of are taught to hate yourself a little bit, bro. Like, wider American culture didn't look like you, didn't act like you. And so you were like, damn it. What's wrong with me or something, So I think there's some of that. That's something that we must work to get past in order to make that deeply personal work.
And there's people that I've seen move through the world with none of that, and I'm like, fuck, that's beautiful,
Now, are these what kind of people are these? Are these like wealthy people or just different people?
Younger people.
Younger people. For
sure.
Sure.
It's different. And especially like the more generation, like, I mean, my parents, I was first generation. I was born in Mexico, but I came at such a young age. I feel like I'm first generation here, So, the further the generations get, the easier it is for them to walk around this earth.
I think about that.
Yeah.
Because I worked in production here in Hollywood for many years, and I was always like photo assisting or production assisting, and I was always like off in a corner, just waiting to be needed to do something, and I'd run and do it, like all. And then one day, a couple years ago, I rented one of those really nice studios for a shoot, and I brought my son, to help me and just to hang out. Have I told you about this?
No, but
and Elias and like I got busy working, like setting up camera and lighting and all this stuff, and then at some point I looked over and I saw Elias, and he was like on a couch with a laptop on his belly.
That's exactly what I
like
imagined.
Eating a snack and like on the internet, and I was like, this motherfucker.
Yes, that's
like
exactly what I thought you were going to say.
It took me like years and years to feel comfortable in this space. And he comes in and he's just like his living room, and I'm like, good for him.
I actually hired a nephew of mine once, actually a cousin, but he's really young. I hired him once, and he just kept sitting on the floor. And I was like, dude, if you're not doing nothing, at least pretend like,
Get out of the way.
And I said, I'm going to go around, and if I come back and you're still on the floor, I'm going to have to send you home. And he fucking just sat on the floor. He was sitting on the curb. I was like, bro, I'm going to have to send you home. Like, I can't fucking have you just kicking it like this. But that is, something that we, like, when we were young and we'd get hired, and it's like,
oh my God,
what's next?
I mean, I still
and
feel that
we
way.
learned not to put our hands in our pockets.
Right.
That's what my dad used to yell at me. Don't ever put your hands in your pocket, on the job. But unfortunately, we're out of time.
All right.
And it's honestly been a beautiful conversation with you. Appreciate you and appreciate your time. We have a final question that we ask everybody on this show.
Okay.
And if you can, try to answer in one sentence.
Okay.
And it's a vague question, but...
Vague?
Yeah. If a being from another planet came down and was trying to figure out what it is that you do, and they just looked at you and they said, Noé, how do you do it? What would your answer be?
How do I do it? Oh man, I guess my answer would be, I'm just trying to be a better person every day.
I'm just trying to be a better person every day.
Yeah.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week. Look up noemontes.com.
NoeMontes.com.
NoeMontes.com, and he's also on Instagram.
Noe Montes Studio.
Noe Montes Studio. Yeah. Thank you very much. See you next week.